I was sitting at the computer alone on a Saturday night. You'd think the college student I was, that I'd be out drinking and partying, but I believed myself to be somewhat of a loner, as I had no friends, so that was out of the question. I was surfing the web for anything to do. I played World of Warcraft quite frequently, but I felt like changing things up a bit since I'd already spent 7 hours that day playing. I remember coming across a television series that I quite enjoyed as a child, and I decided to watch a couple episodes of that. I believe it was Dragon Ball Z, but I can't be too sure. Anyway, around the 4th episode is when I began to hear some strange noises from outside of my window. You see, I used to live in a first-story apartment, and I often kept the window open to let in some fresh air, so any noises from outside could be heard loud and clear. I often heard noises of cars passing by and animals scurrying across the grass, but the noises I heard that night were different, like muffled voices. I quickly dismissed this as my mind playing tricks on me and resumed watching my episode, but there was something that bothered me. Even after I started watching the episode again, the noises still continued. I thought maybe it was getting a bit late and this may be caused by my lack of sleep. So I exited the page and shut down my computer. I stood up and stretched my legs. I figured that I should at least check to see if something was wrong. So I walked over to the window and pulled open the curtains. I thought that I could make out the silhouettes of 2 men standing a few meters away from my window. However, it was so dark that it could have been anything, so I closed the curtains and shut the window and trudged off to my bedroom. It was a small apartment, so it wasn't much of a walk. I flopped down on my mattress and closed my eyes when suddenly I heard the opening of nearby doors. I wondered who might be entering the building at that time of night. I was a bit paranoid by then, so I covered myself with my blanket in an attempt to nullify any noises. I started to feel myself slowly drift into a deep slumber when, almost out of nowhere, I heard the sound of a door slamming. And it came back to me that I forgot to lock the door. I was quivering beneath my blanket, but I reassured myself that my mind was still just playing tricks on me. A silence ensued. I sighed in relief. But the sigh was premature as I started to hear the turn of my bedroom doorknob. I hoped to God that I remembered to lock my bedroom door. I heard the knob shake violently as I laid in my bed, feeling helpless. I must have drifted off to sleep as the next thing I remember was that it was morning. I thought that it was all just a bad dream, and felt relieved it was all over. I moved back into my parents' house 3 days later. I couldn't shake off the fear I felt that night. Until quite recently, I believed it was all just a dream and that my mind was playing tricks on me. However, 2 nights ago, I was looking through my father's stacks of old newspapers when I came across an article from 4 days after the incident. Apparently, a woman had been murdered in her apartment that night. Now, this wouldn't be noteworthy if it weren't for the fact that this woman was my neighbor from across the hall. My mind wasn't tricking me at all. Dave was my best friend. We've been through thick and thin together. We were inseparable. We were friends at a very young age when we were in kindergarten. Those were the days when we were free of our worries. Now let me tell you something. Dave was not always the teacher's pet. He usually got in trouble with teachers and got a lot of detentions. Back in kindergarten, he threw a tantrum when snack time was over and he didn't eat a snack. But hey, who wouldn't be mad? Dave was someone you could trust though. I told him my secrets and he never told them to anyone. Unless I let him. This is why we were best friends. We were loyal to each other, we never betrayed each other, and that was what kept our bond. As we grew older, however, we really started to lose touch. Dave went to a different college than I did, and we never sent letters or emails. I changed my address, and so we really did forget each other. I was busy with my life, and I think Dave was busy with his too. It was 5 years since we've seen each other. It seemed like our long friendship was lost in the past. But that one October day, I got a letter. It was from Dave. He said he finally found me and wanted to hang out like the good old days. It was nice hearing from him again, so I replied and scheduled a camping trip with him. The smell of fresh air in the dense forest colliding with the smell of roasted marshmallows. We were finally talking to each other again, after so long. It was nice having my best friend back. I felt like this day was one of the most memorable. The day we reunited. But that's when we heard a shriek. That blood-curdling cry made the trees rustle their colored leaves. The birds flew away, getting away from such a deafening sound. As I regained my bearings, I saw someone. I shouldn't say someone, it was a girl. But she looked deformed. Her hair was all in knots, but her dark bangs covered one of her white eyes. Her neck was contorted into a position that was impossible for her to be alive, if she even is alive. An artery was protruding from her neck. She had pale, bluish skin. Her fingernails were as long as sharp daggers. My first instinct was to run. Dave followed behind. The creature let out a shriek higher than anything I've ever heard before. She then chased us in her bloodied robes. We just ran and ran, but I no longer heard shrieks or footsteps. I turned around. There were no signs of Dave or that thing. Where were they? Where is Dave? I cried out his name numerous times, but to no avail. He's gone. It's gone. My life feels gone. I'm sobbing about what will happen to Dave. It can't be. It can't be. I managed to make it back to the city. I tried to tell people of what happened, but they called me delusional. I called the police, but they said I needed therapy. Everyone thought I was crazy, but I knew it was all too real. A year and a half later, I'm reading my book in my new home closer to the woods to hunt deer. Even though I hunt now, I would never forget that demon. The creature that took Dave away to a fate worse than death, if not death itself. I still can't believe it today, but I heard a voice calling out to me. Hey Ryan, she's coming. The creature who took me, Ryan. It's coming for you. Prepare yourself for me, please. I then heard the same shriek I heard a year and a half ago. I locked all my doors and I bolted my windows. I took my hunting rifle out and loaded it. I looked out and saw the monster. I spoke, as if to talk to Dave. I'll see you again, my friend. But not yet. You wake up in the middle of the night to a pressure on your chest, as if someone were pressing a foot down and your ribs were about to give way. You try to roll over. You don't move. You try again. Nothing. You can't move your body, your limbs. You call out to your parents, your siblings, anyone nearby. Nothing. No words come from your mouth. You try to scream, not a sound. Panicking, you yell at the top of your lungs, but only in your head. No response from your lips or your lungs. You realize your eyes are still closed. You try to open them, no response. You have no control whatsoever, not of your arms, your legs, eyes, lips. You fight, trying to move. And after an agonizing interim, long minutes, you move. You are awake, and so is your body. You can move, roll over, get out of bed. You lie awake for a while, groggy, going over what happened, afraid to close your eyes again. You eventually succumb to weariness and fall back asleep. Sunlight streams through the windows, bathing your room in a warm glow. You lift your bed sheets off you, swing your legs off your bed. You head to the bathroom to get ready for the day. As you do, you consider what happened to you last night. It was a terrifying experience. Losing control of your body, unable to call out for help or even scream in a panic. It's a hard thing to shrug off. You contemplate your opinions. Maybe you decide to tell your parents, your siblings, a friend. Maybe you keep it to yourself. Whatever your choice, the likely conclusion is that it was just an isolated occurrence. It probably won't happen again, and even if it does, what can you do? Days pass without incident, and the constant distractions of life let you forget about that night. Then, just as before, you awake to a pressure on your chest and you can't move your body. Just as before, you are paralyzed, terrified, and panicking. Again, you fight for control, eventually regaining it. Your night terrors or night paralysis, whatever you chalk it up to, are becoming more frequent. You now wake in the middle of the night almost every other night, 3 or 4 times a week. You fight each time for control of your body. Eventually, you realize your efforts are useless and will always be. No matter how hard you fight it, your body slowly comes back under your control on its own time. Nothing you can do to speed it up. You reach a point where the terrible nights become little more than a nuisance. There's nothing you can do about them anyway. So when you wake up to that distinctive pressure on your chest, you simply wait it out and go back to sleep when you can move again. You wake up in the middle of the night to that crushing pressure on your chest, as has now become so commonplace. You can't move. You're used to it. You wait for some minutes, extraordinarily slow minutes. You can move again. You roll over and go back to sleep. You think nothing of this night. It is just like all the others. Sunlight and birds chirping signal the beginning of the new day. From your bed to your bathroom and your clothes, you get ready for it. You head for the kitchen, from where you smell a nice breakfast cooking. Your family is up and about, chatting, eating, reading. You ask what's for breakfast. No response. Maybe they didn't hear you. You ask again. Nothing. It's not April 1st, is it? Is your whole family in on some sort of prank where they completely ignore you? As if you weren't even there? You try to get their attention. You speak loudly, but nobody seems to hear you. They can't ignore you if you yell, right? Still nothing. You continue yelling and now wave your arms. They can't ignore you for long. They'll eventually break. Your mother gets up and heads towards you. Has she finally decided to give up on that silly prank? She walks right past you. She's heading in the direction of your room. Maybe she has to talk to you in private. Are you in trouble? That could certainly explain why you were ignored. She turns the doorknob and gently pushes the door open. Rise and shine, sleepyhead. Can't sleep in too late. Then you realize. People say that what we see in a mirror is just a reflection of light that allows us to see ourselves as others sees us. Our reflections are only capable of copying our every move, and they cannot surprise us or do us any harm. I am certain that this is not true in the least. I know it sounds far-fetched, but my reflection is an entirely different person. It's hard to say when it all began. Do you ever feel like your reflection moves a fraction of a second slower than you do? Science tells us that this is just our brain processing the visual change, and the result is experiencing a very slight delay. However, I always had the silent fear in the back of my mind that this was a sign that my reflection was its own separate being, and it was only mimicking me to keep up appearances. Of course, this fear was most prevalent when I was a child. Some kids are afraid of the dark, others the monster under the bed or in the closet. I was afraid of mirrors because I believed that they were gateways to a parallel dimension devoid of free will and individuality. Perhaps I had seen one too many scary movies growing up, but I couldn't get the idea out of my head. As a teenager, this fear abated and I spent my time and energy on some carnal pursuits. I was a bit of a rebel, but I never ventured too far outside the boundaries of the law. As an adult, I became a butcher by trade. I cover the basics: cows, pigs, and chickens. They come to me and I make a meal out of them. I like the work so much, I bought my own little shop. Frequently, I have to change gloves and wash my hands in the store bathroom because the residual fluids from the meat would go all over the place. That's when I really started to notice some strange things. One day, I lifted my head after washing my hands and could swear that I saw my reflection grinning, while I knew that I was holding a neutral expression on my face. At first, I shrugged it off and figured that my muscles had some kind of freak spasm that I somehow couldn't feel. But as each day went by, I began to feel like my reflection was intently watching me when I wasn't looking at the mirror. Every so often, I would catch a glimpse of it from the edge of my vision, but I insisted it must be an optical illusion. Perhaps my childhood fears were returning, but I was in denial that it was anything more than my eyes playing tricks on me. But I could no longer deny it when it started happening every time I looked in the mirror. I tried covering up the mirror, taking it down, even shattering it into pieces. But every time I went back in that bathroom, it would be right back up there staring me in the face, as good as new. I decided it was time to face my fear and began actively watching what was happening on the other side of the mirror. In spite of my aversion, I found myself studying my reflection, almost fascinated by how different he was from me. There were times when he seemed to stare like a predator, eyeing a piece of meat. Other times he displayed a nervousness that must have resembled my initial reaction to these bizarre events. Things got much more interesting as it appeared that I was seeing his world through other mirrors. I would watch for hours as he went on with his daily life. The longer it went on, the more I came to believe that despite what I first thought, he couldn't see me. Or at least not all the time. It was amazing because what I had previously believed was so sinister became increasingly mundane and in some ways pathetic. I watched as he drooled over women he had no chance with, cowered in fear of a boss he could never stand up to, and stuffed fatty foods into his face to comfort his lonely soul. It didn't take me long to realize that he was the perfect trifecta for my shop. He's exactly the kind of pig, chicken, and cow that I chop the flesh from every day. And my customers would just eat him up. My wife and I had a bad, stupid habit. We didn't lock the entrance door with the key when we got home. Leaving for work in the morning, I discovered that we slept all night with our door unlocked. We started pointing fingers, trying to figure out who was the last one to come home and who was the more careless one. One time, the front door swung open at night from pretty strong drafts and started clapping. We got pretty scared that time, but the habit still would not go away. But then something happened that forever taught us to lock all the doors with keys. And hell, I'm seriously considering the idea of a real deadbolt. My home is my castle. And why do you need walls if the gate is wide open? That night I could not fall asleep. Suddenly, I decided to check the front door, and although I felt too lazy to get up, that desire was obsessive and unrelenting. I walked into the hallway, tried the door, and yes, it was not locked again. I turned the key 4 times, and for some reason also the second key, the lower one which we never used. I made just 2 steps towards the room when I heard strange sounds behind the door. There was a feeling that someone was touching the door with their hands on the other side, feeling it as blind people do when they encounter an obstacle and try to understand what that is. Although startled, I still turned around with the intention to at least look through the peephole. I approached the door closely and noticed that the handle began turning up and down, as if someone was trying to open the door. Then there was a strange, spasmodic knock. Suddenly, I felt cold. My heart ached. I did not feel fear or horror, but some black melancholy, muddy, incomprehensible anxiety crept into my soul. I didn't feel like looking into the peephole anymore. Quietly, I began moving towards the bedroom. My wife woke up and she was about to say something. I motioned to her to be silent, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. Her eyes widened. I must say, I have one device that I almost never used. To be precise, it is a video camera that is looking at the porch and is connected to my computer. My brother gave it to me, who was at the time working in a company that was installing video surveillance. At the time, I looked at it, played with it a little, and forgot about it. Now I remembered it. I do not know what trait of human nature makes us look into the eyes of the evil. And so I sat down at the computer and launched the image of the porch. What was it? I don't know, but I saw it and my wife saw it. It was something wrapped in dark rags, unnaturally twisting and wobbling. It was walking around up front, scratching at the door, pulling on the handles, leaning and listening to the sounds in the apartments, looking into peepholes. The head of that something was also wrapped in rags, and from the rags its dark hands were sticking out. They were very narrow, with unnaturally long, maybe 2.5 times longer than normal fingers. Something came up to my door several more times, and leaned against it for a long time. It seemed that my heart stopped. Tears were streaming down my wife's face, and she bit the edge of the bed sheet, trying not to make a sound. Confused and anxious, I was reading Our Father to myself. Then that crawled down. Early June dawn was waking up the street. If we lived in a village, there would probably be roosters singing. An hour later, we came to our senses. I regret that my wife saw all of it. She is still getting over the shock, and I can see that she is still scared. Yesterday, she asked me to move houses. Well, it is possible since we are renting anyway. Plus, I also don't feel comfortable here anymore. But I'm thinking, what would happen if I did not lock the door? We would have been found with ripped out insides and blood on the walls. Or, as they show in horror movies, we would be huddled up in a corner with our faces distorted by mortal terror. Or does this evil creep into your soul, and a person with glassy eyes goes to the kitchen for a knife? Or takes a step out of the window? I do not know, and I do not want to know. Lock your doors. Take care of yourself. Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Sir Midnight's World of Horror. I really appreciate all of the love and support that you've been giving me since I've been kind of behind the shadows and doing other things. But I do want to announce that I will be making episodes and longer episodes, usually ranging from about 30 minutes to an hour. Episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'm going to stick with this schedule this year because I have so much support coming from this podcast, and I really do appreciate every single bit of it. So I'm going to give it back to you. Everybody's been begging for episodes, so here they are. I hope that everyone enjoys, and yeah, don't forget, don't sleep tonight.